Hi all, I'm back for week 2, partway through week 2 that is, of our little sum ups that I'll do on videos so you get to see my happy shining face. One option that was mentioned earlier is to have students do these sorts of quick little summaries. Assign them each a little topic, have them post that on a discussion board, and you get to see what each of your students' smiling faces are like rather than that little tiny avatar icon in the corner. Students often have smartphones and are able to go ahead and do a quick video and post it. They can even do that from within the mobile app. We don't like the mobile app much because it's very glitchy and has a lot of problems posting submissions for assignments or tests. So we strongly suggest that students still do those pieces outside of the mobile app and make sure that they do those in a wired connection when possible or a very stable online network connection. Wireless, that is. So there were 2 pieces that we really covered this week. The first one was giving over control, and the second one was building community and your own presence in the online course. Both can be very tricky in that one is practically foreign to many instructors who are used to the old sage on the stage style of teaching, where it's lecture in the front, kind of make sure that students are getting it by looking over their faces and then quiz and repeat. Online classes don't really facilitate that very well. We can say that here are my recorded lectures, here is the quiz after, or read the textbook and do the quiz, but that's actually not considered an online course worthy of college credit. That is considered a correspondence course. There must be substantive, regular, instructor-initiated interaction in order for it to be considered credit-worthy. So please make sure that you're not creating correspondence courses. They may be incredibly easy for you to implement, but when the time comes for your course to be observed by your supervisors, they will not be happy with that kind of course. And if you're being reviewed through the online course review for the design of the course, it will not pass with just that lather, rinse, repeat type course design. So you have to build in those kinds of interactions. So how do you do that? How do you build those interactions? That's the first part we'll look at here, is the community building. You probably think, oh, discussion boards. They are the fallback. It is standard operating procedure for most instructors to say, I can build community by having students talk to each other, by me chiming in on the discussion boards, and that's great, but recognize that students really don't like introductory posts for discussion boards. Some will. Some will be excited and read every single one of them. Oh, these are my classmates. This is wonderful. But the majority of them are sick and tired of saying, hi, I'm so-and-so. I'm from such and such. I hope to get this degree. I'm in this course because of XYZ. Find a way to spark those up. They're good to have, but switch it up a little bit. I mentioned my 2 truths and a lie that I ran through for one introductory discussion board post. That each student had to give me 2 truths about themselves and 1 lie about themselves. And at the end of the week, they came back and posted again to tell us which was the lie. In many cases, that sparked a lot of conversation where it was shared experiences and a lot of guesswork, a lot of lies, at least things that were perceived to be lies that were actually truths. So I wrestled professionally for a while, or I got to meet the president, and so quite a bit of I'm a published author, those sorts of things really can build a lot of community, and when people meet face to face, they remember those parts of their fellow classmates. Make sure you take part 2, so you may want to have a go-to for what your lie might be. There are a lot of different options that you can use to spice up those discussion boards. Another area is that you might consider not using discussion boards for every bit of interaction between students. Open up a wiki. have them use that to start building the study guide for the entire course or for your midterm. Each student will post a concept that they think will be covered on the midterm or the final. Another student comes in and tells us that I'm having trouble with this concept. What's a mnemonic device to help me remember it? Or does anybody have an easy way for us to study this concept? Why is this not X when it's actually Z? I don't understand why. So students can actually start building up a study guide there, and all you have to do is come in shortly before the test and clean it up a little bit if need be, or post a couple bits at the bottom going, don't forget this, make sure you cover this, and this is a big important piece. If you highlight or otherwise mark those extra special important spots, you don't have to spend the time coming up with a study guide. The students have done it for you. It's also a single location for this information so that students don't have to go in and click through possibly hundreds of discussion board posts. So a wiki is better for that. If you've done a blog post, you've already noticed there are some slight differences. I will tell you this, it is much harder to grade blog posts if you're grading for comments. So if you tell students, like we did in this course, that they are required to post a comment on someone else's blog, you will struggle to grade those. You have to write down somewhere else who wrote the comments. They are not easily seen. If you grade discussion boards, all of one student's posts and comments will all be on one page for you. That's not the way that blogs are graded. So you may want to have the blog portion be the gradable part and the comments be separate from that, or just not grade the comments when you do a blog. One point that was made regarding the emails that tend to come in from students at all hours of the day and night. This was, I'm not sure who was exactly, but whoever said it. I took notes on a lot of them, but not that. If students are bringing you the same questions again and again, you may want to build a frequently asked questions content area, kind of like you did with the Start Here content area. Instead, build that button up, call it an FAQ, and inside that button, create nothing but items where here's a question, here's our response. Here's a question, here's our response. If you can't get into the quiz, check and see if the due date has passed. If you're unable to find the assignment, check to see if the due date has passed. If the due date has passed, check the syllabus to see if you can still submit something. If you can, then contact the instructor. If you cannot, don't bother. Make it clear that you're not going to respond to emails if that information exists in your FAQ or in your syllabus. We are building an FAQ area specific for Blackboard in general that we will be pushing into the courses probably for the fall of 2019. That's part of what the Online Student Success Subcommittee has been doing this semester, is figuring out exactly what will help instructors the most, as well as students, so that they don't run into these sorts of problems with Blackboard as a whole. Your course policies, though, need your own separate little FAQ area. Let's see, the giving over of control then, we'll move on to that. It's hard to keep your presence in the course, which is a requirement. Regular, substantive, instructor-initiated interaction is needed for it to be a credit-bearing course. Otherwise, you have a correspondence course, and we don't want that. While it's really easy for you to grade the lecture and the students do a quiz, and the lecture and the students do a quiz, and you only pop in to check on the discussion board posts every once in a while. It's very easy to grade those, but it's not considered to be worthy of a college credit course. You must give regular interaction that is generated by you. You chime in, you talk with the students, and substantive meaning that it's not just general. You can't post the announcements every so often, set them to go off at a certain date and time, and assume that that's actually addressing your individual student's needs. So make your feedback as individual as you can. Do make sure that you're giving students clear notice that you are paying attention to what they say. Make your questions and your prompts such that students are going to be interested in them and chime in, mentioning them by name. If you're able to clearly tell them your expectations in advance are that they will ask you questions, that they will assume you are going to be monitoring discussion boards, that you will be giving them you will be giving them individual feedback. That brings me to a point about the rubrics. If you're embedding a rubric in Blackboard and you make comments within that rubric, students cannot see that unless they open the rubric. So I always make it a point, and you may have seen this, to say that there is individualized feedback within the rubric. Please see that. Otherwise, they'll say you never gave them feedback when you have all these wonderful comments stuck in a rubric they didn't open up. So do make sure that you guide them toward that rubric. They'll eventually know that it's there. But at first, tell them it's there. It's easy to over-notify students via email. We as instructors are utterly dependent on our Jeffco email, but students don't use it as often as we really wish they would. They can set up Blackboard to send them a notification via text message, but they have to set it up in their notifications area. It is not easy to do. We cannot send them text messages anymore. We used to have that capability, but there were some privacy laws that got changed, and we are no longer allowed to pull those mobile devices and phone numbers into Blackboard. So it has to be students setting it up for that. Eventually, we hope to have instructions on how students can do that. In the meantime, be very wary of how you send out emails and how many you send out. That's why this one will not be going via email. It'll be pushed to the announcements area, but it won't be sent via email in order to help you see that, let them know the one's there and that more are coming. Just don't keep bombarding them. So they will not see that as your presence if you just keep sending email notifications, because they ignore that part of the presence. It has to be in the course for them. If your expectations are high for students, you will enable them to start grabbing the reins themselves. I say this because a lot of us are concerned with how much control we can give students. We have information we need to get to them. How do we ensure they get that without running off on a different direction than the course entailed? If you have your students look at the expected learning outcomes in the official course syllabus very early in the course, and then have them figure out, a discussion board's a good place for this, how will this fit in their lives later on? Will it help them in a later college course? Will it help them when they're on their career paths? What will they use this information for? Use those responses to start designing projects or larger scale assignments for later in the course for them. If at all possible, have them pick that project. You can have a list of different projects. You can make them individual projects. You can make them group projects. You can let them choose if they want to work in a group or alone. But give them the ability to make some decisions about what they want to use this information for in the course itself. If you have them periodically chime in and say, I want my project, my course assignment, the biggie, to be about this. I want to hopefully incorporate this concept, and this concept, all of them from the outcomes of the course. You have a really solid piece of almost capstone-like evidence that your students are learning these concepts. Now, they may not think big enough, so you may want to spur them to think a little bigger, to create something different and not just a paper. Have them create a newscast from 1982 about the big event that happened then. Imagine all the concepts from history they can incorporate there. Have them come up with the architectural drawings as best they can using the mathematical concepts they've learned during the course. Have them come up with case studies. Have them come up with a presentation that is multimedia. Have them design a itinerary for a couple who's traveling through Italy in the 1920s. There are a whole bunch of different ideas that they can use. It doesn't have to be the commonplace paper with citations. It can still have citations, but having them use it more creatively will force them to really think about what it is that they're sharing and have them post it on a discussion board as more interaction there for you. A couple of other pieces that came in. Have your student introduction posts be vibrant. Don't necessarily just have them do the commonplace. The 2 truths and a lie is very popular. Having them post little videos of themselves like this can be very popular as well. It's nice to see the faces of each of your students. There will be a Center for Teaching and Learning presentation on discussion boards coming. If you're unable to make that, we don't have a date yet, but the slideshow presentation will be made available through the faculty tab, CTL resources. That's coming soon in the spring. It's difficult to craft your questions or your prompts in discussion boards so that you don't have what Brian had said is the constant regurgitation of the same responses again and again and again. The more you can relate it to real life for students, the less likely you are to get those commonplace responses. Try to keep them from yes and no questions. Try to keep them from individual definitions. Post the definition in the prompt. They won't have the ability to go back and copy and paste your prompt. They'll have to come up with an application for it. Think of the Bloom taxonomy. Go to the higher order thinking pieces. The assessment handbook, which is also available through the CTL page, has a list of action verbs associated with each level of Bloom's taxonomy. Grab one of those verbs, throw that in a discussion board. Create a simple drawing showing me how this trajectory in physics works. Or tell me what this sort of person would be dealing with in medieval life. Or there are lots of different things that you could come up with. Just grab one of those verbs, even grabbing create, analyze, synthesize, grabbing the Bloom verbs and having them use those to craft an answer will get you far. Make very clear if students will be penalized for spelling and grammar. If you want your posts from students to be formal, to show that they are able to effectively use written academic discourse, by all means, ping them for those errors. But if you want them to be exploring the ideas more than expressing them clearly in academic parlance, don't count off for spelling, grammar, and mechanics. There's a time and a place for it, but recognize that in online discourse, students will hold back if they can't figure out how to perfectly express it when spelling, grammar, and mechanics are counted as points off. I've found that the conversations are far better if I don't count those for most of my posts. There are a few I will tell them this is a formal post. You must cite your sources. You must use academic spelling, grammar, and mechanics. But a lot of them I will say it's time to explore. Be respectful. I'm not counting off for spelling, grammar, and mechanics. Give me 2 paragraphs. That's it. So they tend to go off in wonderful tangents that way. So hopefully you'll find some great ideas in here, and see you next week.